The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.
And welcome everyone to round 5 of the 2022 Spring Chess Classic. I am Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez here to bring you the coverage of the action with my good friend, Grandmaster Cristian Chirila.
Alejandro, always a pleasure to be commentating on these amazing games from this amazing studio here at the St. Louis Chess Club.
Good to be here. Let's take a look at what we have for you. It's 2 round robins, very strong players here, not quite the US Championship, not quite the Singfield Cup, but entertaining games nonetheless, and a star-studded field. Let's see where they are sitting at right now after 4 rounds of chess. We'll start with Group A. And we have 2 leaders. It's Ray Robson, that is an alum from Webster University, sharing first place with a current Webster University chess player, Aram Jacobian. They've both been scintillating, 3 out of 4 for both players. And they're followed closely by Jeffrey Shuang, Ilya Nishnik, and Hans Niemann.
Tied in 6th position, we have Sam Sevian and Darius Zvierch, who seems to be on the comeback. Tied for 7th position, we have Mikhail Antipov and Alex Lenderman. Unfortunately, both of these players don't seem to be in the form of their lives. Neither is Kamil Dragun in 10th position. He lost yesterday as well. He only scored half a point out of 5 possible games so far. And how about the B group, Alejandro?
In the B group, we have an absolute clear leader. It's Chris Repka with 4 out of 4 dominating the field. But despite that, he is still being followed closely by Christopher Yu, still a point away from him. Both of these players won yesterday. Another person that won yesterday is our clear 3rd place, Abhimanyu Mishra, moving to +1 after a nice victory yesterday there. He's currently in clear 3rd place. Meanwhile, with 50%, we have Elshan Moriadiabadi and Titus Stramavicius.
And we do have a big tie for the 6th place. With 1.5 points out of 4, we have Robert Hungaski, the rating favorite of this event, JJ Alimarandi, Sam Khanin, and Arman Mikaelian. And unfortunately for Harshid Raja, he's sole in 10th place with only half a point so far.
The tournament format for you, as we see the players already there in action. It is a 2 10-player round robin. The time control is simple, 90 minutes for 40 moves with an extra 30-second increment for move 1. And of course, once you reach move 40, like in most classical tournaments nowadays, you get an extra 30 minutes of thinking time.
Also, the players may not mutually agree to a draw in less than 40 moves. They can find that elusive repetition, they can find the perpetual to make that draw, but they cannot mutually agree to a draw. And this is going to ensure that we have a very combative event here at the St. Louis Chess Club.
The schedule, 1 round a day. We start every day at 1 p.m. Central. Of course, not in the last day. That's the only exception because we want to accommodate playoffs. First place will be determined by an over-the-board shootout. So if necessary, don't miss those. Though at the moment, we do have 2 clear leaders in both sections. And coverage, as usual, starts 2.5 hours in. So 3:30 on most days. On Thursday, March 10th, we will be starting at 1:30 p.m. Central.
Also, don't forget to join the conversation. You can write us specifically on Twitter. That's where we are most active at #SpringChessClassic. Ask us your questions and we will answer them. Also, it's very important, this show is broadcast both on YouTube and Twitch. And on Twitch, if you donate, every $75 is going to help a Scholastic student go from a semester at the St. Louis Chess Club.
Absolutely. This is the bridge that the St. Louis Chess Club provides to the community, taking them from Scholastic players all the way to the super elite. This is one of the many stepping stones, and for Scholastic players that semester, those $75 will sponsor a kit for a full semester. So if you can donate, even if it's a few dollars here, a couple of players can get together.
Highly appreciate it.
We really highly appreciate it. We're not doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for the community, so help us out with that one. And meanwhile, let's take a look at what we have in store for you today. Pairings of Group A. Alex Lenderman is playing against Sam Sevian. This is already a classic matchup in US Championships. Meanwhile, Kamil Dragun has been a little luckless in this tournament, is finding his form against Hans Niemann. Darius Zvierch is playing in a battle of collegiate chess against Aram Jacobian. And Mikhail Antipov is playing against Ray Robson. But certainly the game of the day has to be this one. 2 of the highest rated players in the tournament, Jeffrey Xiong against Ilya Nishnik, former super prodigies, now well-established grandmasters, both of them with 2.5 points, trailing the leaders by only half a point. So they do feel a little bit of pressure to accumulate points, but not fully panic mode quite yet if they want to win the tournament. As we do see Jeffrey, who has been a little bit off form, I would say, in this tournament, trying his best. We'll get back into this game as soon as we are done with the B pairings. And speaking of them, we have them in front of us. The B pairings are Elshan Moryadibadi playing against Christopher Yu. JJ Alimarandi has actually already finished that game against Harshid Raja, that finished in a draw. Abhimanyu Mishra is currently playing against Robert Hungaski. Titus Starmavicius has also drawn his game against Sam Khanin, so we'll just go very quickly over it. And the battle of the day has to be clear. He is the sharpest man up there, definitely the best dressed, and over the board, his tactics have been the best in Group B. 4 out of 4 is currently the score of Chris Repka. He's trying to add to that score by playing against another collegiate player, Armand Michaelian, who represents University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. They are currently the national champions, but will not be defending their championship in the Final Four this year as they were unable to qualify.
Alejandro, you were mentioning a very important game of today's round, and that is in Group A, the big clash between Jeffrey Xiong and Ilya Nishnik. And let's remember what the trends look like for these two players. Well, yesterday, Jeffrey Xiong, also with the white pieces, just like today, he lost against Aram Hakobian. Well, he didn't play a good game yesterday, and he's not really playing a very good game today either. Ilya Nishnik, on the other hand, he won a brilliant game against the struggling Kamil Dragun yesterday. So let's see what is happening right now in this big clash. Well, after losing yesterday against Aram Hakobian, Jeffrey decided to go for it, to go all in. He started with a move e4, and the players soon entered into a very, very sharp and theoretical Najdorf defense. Knight to f6, knight to c3, a6, bishop to e3, e5, knight to b3. Of course, we see nowadays white play absolutely every single move possible on the board in this position. Knight to b3, knight to e2, rook to g1, bishop to g5, f3, f4, anything you can think of. Bishop to d2 also. But of course, the main line remains bishop to e3, e5, knight to b3, bishop to e6, f3, and now of course white is preparing for an avalanche of a pawn storm on the king side, potentially with a move g4, g5, displays this knight from f6, and black has this interesting alternative of trying to stop that early on with the move h5, and this is exactly what he does. White continues with his plan of finishing his development on the queen side, getting the king on c1, castling long. And now we have this position, king to b1. This is, by the way, still everything that we've seen so far is theory and has been played before. Rook to c8, g3, quite an interesting approach. Of course, white needs to find a way to break through on this side. And the best way to do that would be to take advantage of the hook on h5 with a potential h3 and then g4. The problem with h3 is that black can immediately stop that with the move h4. So what white has to do before he plays this move h3 is to play the move g3. And this is exactly what we see on the board. Bishop to e7, and he decides to go for h4, a different approach, potentially solidifying this pawn on h5 and targeting it later on in the game. b5, knight to d5, knight takes d5, e takes d5, bishop to f5, immediately targeting the pawn on c2. I would love, as white, to not have to play this move bishop to d3, but rather to prepare this move g4 and target the bishop on f5. Unfortunately, I cannot play bishop e2 because the pawn on c2 is hanging. The bishop on f5, despite the fact that it doesn't have that many squares, is a very, very potent attacking piece. And that's why Jeffrey decides to exchange that with bishop to d3. And we see this position, e takes, g takes, queen to c4, offering the queen trade. Well, white doesn't want a queen trade. White wants to blast through with a move f5, try to open up the position in front of the black king and checkmate. That is the only viable plan at this point for white, because the pawn structure is definitely favorable for black. So white has to find the dynamic in the position. Bishop takes h4, rook to f1, rook to e8, f5, as I was mentioning, bishop to f6, rook to f4, attacking the queen. And this is a very beautiful transition from Ilya Nishnik. Of course, you can go queen to c7 and stay passive like this, but it feels like right now white is definitely on the offensive. I can definitely put this rook on g1, potentially solidify my position on the queen side first with the move c3, and then bring all my pieces towards the attack. Well, instead of that, black spotted this very nice combination with queen takes c2, simplifying the position and transitioning into a much better endgame, because after queen takes c2, rook takes c2, you have to take rook takes e3, and now we see you did get an exchange as white, but I do have two very, very dangerous pawns on the king side, ready to march down the board, ready to promote. And unfortunately for Jeffrey, it doesn't seem like his position is getting any better. This is going to be a very, very difficult defense. Also, I'm looking at the clocks right now. This is move number 28. You have a very difficult position as white, 12 moves to go, and only 14 minutes, while your opponent is pretty much playing at double your speed. 33 minutes and 55 seconds for Ilya Nishnik. We know he's a very fast player, but right now the pressure is definitely on Jeffrey, and well, he could be losing 2 games in a row with the white pieces. Alejandro, what do you think of that?
No, I would never have predicted that. He is such an experienced player. Also somebody that knows very well how to play these particular tournaments, having won the Spring Chess Classic A group in 3 different occasions. I think he's the only person who've ever done that. Yeah, for sure he's the only person who've ever done that. We haven't even had that many. But he looks like, I mean, it looks pretty hopeless. It's not just the fact that his position is bad, but you look at it from a practical point of view, and maybe a computer will tell you it's really not that bad, white can hold it, but black has a plan. You put something on e5. It really doesn't matter what it is. You put a bishop or you put a knight on e5, and then you push your pawns. And you kind of ask the question from white, what is your idea? What are you going to create? As we see Ilya just walking around, he's very well aware of what his plan is. And Jeffrey has so many questions to answer, including, what do I do with all of these pawns rolling down on the board? So speaking of that game that Ilya seemed to be so interested in, I have it up on the board. It's another one of those high-rated games in the tournament. It's also a very important game for the standings, as Dariusz Fwirt, currently sitting on 50%, is playing against Aram Jacobian, who is sitting on +2, having an absolutely excellent tournament, defeating Jeffrey Xiong yesterday, and having won against, why is this eluding me? He won another game.
I cannot remember either.
I want to say it was either Lenderman, I want to say.
Ilya Nishnik?
No. Aram. Who did Aram beat?
Aram. Yesterday he drew against Antipov. So he won against Jeffrey. Yeah, he beat somebody else, but I cannot remember exactly who it was.
We'll look it up, don't worry about it. But at this point, he is definitely on the defensive side. I think it's the first time that I see him on the defensive side in this tournament, as he is playing my student at St. Louis University, Dariusz Fwirt. And it's clear that he's on the defensive, not only because he has less space, he just has is down a pawn. This pawn on e5 is simply extra. Let me show you more or less how this happened. This came from an open Spanish. I'm not going to bog down on the details of the opening, but this is not considered to be the main line of the open Spanish right now, but we did see it in a couple of occasions, and I find it not fully equal. And it was clear that something went wrong here for black when, after the move knight d6, he decided to just leave the knight on d4 alone. He didn't take on f3. He didn't do any of the other possible solutions he has to defend this pawn on d4. You can see that white is attacking it 3 times, actually 4 times. But he doesn't move the knight. He just kind of stays there. He could have taken on f3, but perhaps he didn't like the dynamic possibilities. I'm assuming of queen f3, moving the queen somewhere, and f4, f5.
Maybe even g takes f3 and f4, f5.
I was even considering that. Yeah, I don't have an engine, but g takes, and maybe this is also quite dangerous with the king coming to h1 and rook on g1.
You don't have the light square bishop as black to pose any problems on that long diagonal, and I do have that very nice centralized queen on e4 defending everything.
And to me, the main problem of black's position here is that you're not only down the light squared bishop, I also think you're down the dark squared bishop, because this guy is just not participating in the game. It's being blocked by his own pawn. So it doesn't have any influence on the king side. You have to shed a pawn every time you want to bring it back. And it doesn't have another diagonal to go through, right? a4 is always going to lose a pawn as well. So the bishop is solid, but solid is not good when you're attacking on the king side. This would be a very dangerous situation for black. So he decided to play in a little bit more of a practical way, shedding this pawn on c5 immediately in order to bring the bishop back into the game. So we have this simplification. You couldn't intermezzo at any point with bishop takes d6, because knight b5 attacks both the queen and the bishop. That regains my pawn. So after knight takes, queen takes, we get this position where black has this pin as a source of counterplay. It's not trivial to unpin, and it's also not trivial to see where white is going to make progress. But he is up a pawn, and he does have a ton of space, and it feels that he is a couple of accurate moves away from putting realistic winning pressure on black's position. For the moment, I think he needs to keep as many pawns on the queen side alive as he can. It'll make his life easier to convert, not to trade the b for the a. If you only have one flank, it'll be a lot easier for black to hold. But the knight on d6 is pretty much a monster, and it's difficult to take. The reason it's difficult to take is that whenever a pawn lands on d6, either before or after I take with the rook on d6, it just jams in black's pieces. They just can't move. There's not a lot of maneuver room for this rooks on d7 and d8. And you might be wondering, well, what am I going to do with all this maneuvering room I suddenly have? And usually what you do is that you combine threats with the pawn promoting and advancing, which creates this rooks being stuck, and swinging over this rook to the king side with a d3 or d4, and then g3 or g4, and start creating immediate tactical threats against the king that are not always so easy to answer. So certainly a strong advantage there for Darius. He's not doing great on the clock. I think he has 16 minutes and 40 seconds for 13 moves, but it's also not so bad considering his other situations in the games.
And it looks like an easy position to play, right? The material is quite limited. Black doesn't really have any ways in which he can create any sort of attack against the white king. The white king is extremely safe. You don't have any structural weaknesses either. And you know that whenever you're going to see bishop takes d6, because at some point it does feel like black will have to take on d6. And that's when I'm going to take back with the pawn, and I'm just going to have that thorn in your position on d6 as white, which probably will give me, at least from a practical perspective, a winning position.
Yeah, it might be one of those positions, again, I talked about it a little bit with the Jeffrey game. You might turn on an engine, and the engine might think, you know, this is not that bad, you can actually hold it. But it's tough to do so over the game. You don't know the evaluation of the position, and it looks super, super scary. In many positions, you're just kind of struggling to survive.
No, and it definitely looks like a Darius might be taking this one and might be taking Aram. I think is one of the leaders.
Yeah, he's currently on 3 out of 4 with Ray. Ray's the other only player with 3 out of 4. So let's jump to his game real quick. That way we can go around the horn a little bit. Let me see what's going on.
So this was a Gioco Piano.
Okay.
If we go from the beginning, and we see Antipov play these Gioco Piano positions quite often.
It's kind of one of those guys that plays the Gioco Piano with black, white in every single game.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's forcing his opponents to go e4, but it somehow feels like every single game of Antipov is an Italian.
Yeah. No, he really enjoys playing these positions as white. He believes he has at least a practical advantage because he has analyzed these positions quite a lot. So he feels comfortable. Nevertheless, unfortunately for him in this event, it doesn't seem like he's getting the advantages that he usually gets in the Gioco Piano. He won a lot of very important games in this one against high caliber players, especially some Russians. Alexeyenko, he beat him once in this opening. But in this particular event, also against your student, Darius Vierch, he didn't seem to be getting a huge advantage out of the opening, and he actually lost that game. Right now, once again, he's on the defensive side. He's a pawn down. Of course, you have probably enough compensation for equality. Nevertheless, not more than that. And that definitely doesn't seem to be something he enjoys very much.
Yeah, let's analyze a little bit. You can see the white structure is clearly superior to black's. It's basically one pawn island. And black has these 2 weaknesses on c7 and a6. But that being said, they're weaknesses, and it's hard to pick them up fully. It's one of those scenarios in which you can imagine worst case for black. You shed one pawn and go into an easily drawn endgame. But actually winning this pawn presents more practical problems than one would think, right?
It does.
Because white is in some ways overexposed. He's pushed all of these pawns all the way here. That means the knight's anchor squares are very far away from the king. So if you go something like knight c6, I can just sidestep it, right?
Yeah, if you take back on c6, probably I will be able to take back with the rook, and it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to defend everything.
Even though you have this check, now I have this double attack. So I still think you lose a pawn.
And the queen on a4 is very importantly defends the pawn on
it defends the
e4.
pawn on e4, so you don't have any trickeries against this. But if I just sidestep it, there are so many scenarios in which I wonder.
That's a problem.
Yeah, if the knight on f4 is just better than my knight on c6. This is optically very nice, but optics don't win chess games. Good moves win chess games, and knight c6 might not actually be in the right direction.
No, I don't like this knight c6. I want to keep the knight on d4 so that whenever you try to shift that knight towards the center via g6, as you were mentioning, I want to jump to f5.
Yeah, it feels like there's this kind of
Dance,
yeah.
between the knights.
In endgame, sometimes we call it mind squares, right? Where like, if one side moves this way, you take advantage of it. And you're seeing that if this knight on e7 ever moves, especially to g6, this knight on f5 is actually doing something because this pressure on g7 is annoying, and you're controlling a lot of good squares like e3 and g3 that you never know when you might need. So what is white's move here? I'm struggling to find a good
All right, let's
move.
make some, let's create some basic attacks. Why don't we just simply go... In fact, you know what? Let's calculate the most critical line, queen d7.
All right, queen d7 is certainly appealing. It attacks the knight, attacks the pawn. You could move this knight from e7, but as we mentioned, this is at the very least an improved version of what we've been talking about. So critical would probably be to take on d4.
Take on d4, I take on e7.
Yeah, I'm going to lose this pawn. The question is, can I do something in the meantime? Something like rook b8. The problem is you take with the queen.
I take with the queen, and then I think I have the perpetual, right? After you invade via the second rank, I have queen c8, queen f5. Actually, not only a perpetual, I'm winning that.
Yeah, on the problem for black is that actually when the pawn on c7 disappears, this rook can come down to the last rank and deliver a checkmate. And of course, you don't want to play g6 because queen takes f7 is checked. That looks like a hopeless endgame. So queen d7 might be critical in this position. And after queen takes d4, queen takes d7, yeah, maybe this is just too annoying. Of course, black is in no real danger in this position. I can just probably pass the move, even like start pushing this pawn. And it's hard for white to really comfortably create threats with this king being on g1. But I also don't think white's in any real danger.
It doesn't seem like it. It seems like the position is extremely close to just liquidating into a very equal endgame.
I have to agree. Let's finish up Group A with what we haven't seen so far. There's a bit of a mess. I don't think I can evaluate it as fast as I wanted to. This is Camille Dragun with the white pieces playing against Hans Niemann.
Camille, who is a player that right now he's been struggling quite a lot.
Yeah, he's been struggling for a few years. I mean, he was a very solid 26-30, 26-40 player, represented the Polish team in several key competitions, including the Olympiad, but has been struggling in his form in the last few years, dropping out of the 2600 club and joining ours, Cristian, of the lowly 2500s.
Oh man, don't remind me. Don't remind me.
But,
and he played actually this move g4. I like this move. I think it's a very important move. You need to do something to disrupt the pawn structure that black is trying to set up with the pawn potentially on f4.
And this kind of becomes critical, right? What if I do play f4 anyway? And the trick, I guess, is knight d3.
Yes.
And the idea is that if you go rook b7,
I take on f4.
I think you can take this, right?
I think
you
so
go
too,
rook here.
Now let's say...
I'm not sure which one I start with.
I think I want to start with... No, I cannot start with king g3. Because you take on f4 with the bishop and then rook to e3, which wins the game.
This is a very important point. And the king can no longer defend the rook. Black wins this one. So order of operations is, as always, important. Rook df1 must be played. And I don't think there is a trick here. It looks like black has tied down white completely on the f-file and stuff like that, but you actually need a trick, because if you give me one more move, I'll put my knight on d3 and I'll be fully, and I'll just be okay, I'll be winning. Thank you for the free pawn and the blockading knight.
Yeah, and if you have to take on f4, well, that's just a losing endgame.
Yeah, then you might as well not take on f or not play the move f4, right?
This g4 was well calculated by Dragoon, and it doesn't seem like black has the option of pushing and solidifying that bishop on e3 with f4.
The thing is that if you don't play the move f4,
You probably have to take.
yeah, but I'm starting to warm up to white's position because
I agree.
the knight comes back. This is a passed pawn, right? I can push it whenever I want. And unlike this pawn on d4 that's already blockaded on the key with the beautiful knight on d3, you have to find out which of your pieces is going to come back and do it. I mean, the bishop, it takes forever to retreat to c7. It doesn't have a good avenue. I feel I like white's chances here. I'm not sure it's more than a slight edge, but if you gave me the option of which side to take, I would definitely take white.
And how are we doing on the clock? Because I know Camille has huge problems with his time management in this event.
I see he has 8 minutes for
How many
the
moves?
remaining 12 moves.
Ooh.
It's not amazing, but it's also not terrible, I think, for an endgame of this.
It's a simplified position, absolutely.
Yeah, you're not going to get tricked with a bishop on e3, right? It feels like you should be able to handle the complications. Still, plenty to play for both sides. With perfect play, I assume it's some sort of draw. Let me cheat a little bit. I'll peek at the engine as well. And yeah, well, everything that we said, the engine is saying you guys are actually not so bad at chess. White is slightly better, giving a small point for edge. But visually, this is very understandable for us.
Well, Alejandro, let's actually jump to that game, a very important game between Lenderman and Sam
Oh
Sedia.
yeah, we haven't looked at it yet.
No, and this one is going Sam's way with the black pieces. Lenderman definitely not finding his form in this event. So
This is, by the way, the second rough tournament for Lenderman in a row. He had a very bad showing in Charlotte not so long ago where he lost a lot of rating.
He seems to be struggling, at least in the past year. So let's see what happened in this game. e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and once again we see a Joko Piano on the board, just like in the game between Antipov and Ray Robson. And now we see this bishop to c5, knight f6, d3, d6. By the way, this Joko Piano has been played at the top level for so many years.
I'm okay if they ban it. I'm okay if the St. Louis Chess Club bans the Joko Piano for a year. No Berlin, no Joko Pianos, none of these allowed in our tournaments. You can play whatever else you want. You can play Fischer random to start the game if you feel like it. But man, I've seen so many Joko Pianos in the last, if I said the last year, that would be crazy. The last week.
Everybody plays it.
The last week, I can count how many important Joko Pianos were played.
And you know why? Previously, the Joko Piano was considered to be a very easy opening to play for both sides and usually was leading to very drawish positions. Now, it's an extremely sharp line, actually, and both sides can find different ideas on a whim. We see different ideas from day to day. Somebody plays something this day, somebody is going to improve on that specific variation the next day. And this is exactly what's happening. We see this line with a6, by the way, black can play with a5, black can play with the pawn still on a7 and bishop b6 ideas. Black has a lot of setups that he can try. And after a6, a4, bishop to a7, rook to e1, we see this move knight to g4 without the castle. So black decided to delay the castle and try this attempt with knight to g4, which forces white's hand. Of course, after rook to e2, I'm going to threaten to play h3, and that's just going to win me a tempo. But let's see what happened. Queen to f6. Now, if you go h3, first of all, knight to h6 is a move, but I have a feeling also h5 is possible in this position. Follow, you cannot take on g4 because you're simply going to get checkmated. This is completely busted for a black. I'm going to go g3. If you try to go knight to g5, continue with g3, and coupled with the action of the bishop, this very nasty pin on the a7, g1 diagonal, this pawn on g3 ready to support the checkmating patterns, queen to h6 coming for black, doubling up on the h file and invading for the checkmate. This is just game over. You cannot do that. So after queen to f6, we see this move knight bd2, a much more tame approach. Of course, white is trying to go knight to f1, knight to g3, reinforce the defensive setup around the king, potentially exchange some pieces, and try to catch black off guard, because of course black played this move knight to g4. It seems like he's not going in the right direction. But what black does at this point is g5. doubling down on this attack on the king side. No castle. I'm not even dreaming about castling on the king side. I actually want to dream. I want to castle on the queen side. So let's see what happened. d4, rook to g8, setting up the pressure on the g file. b4, knight to d8, and I do like this maneuver quite a lot because knight to d8 supports this idea of bishop to e6, and after that I'm going to put the knight on e6. I really want to get my knight to f4. If I manage to get the knight to f4, then my position as black is going to be dominant. So let's see what happened. Knight to f1, knight to e6, knight to e3, knight to f4, rook to d2, huge mistake. It seems like at this point, white had this golden opportunity of trying to exchange the knight and take full control of the position with the move knight to d5. If you take on d5, well, that's a big problem because right now I'm going to take with the e-pawn and your king is going to be exposed. Terribly exposed in this position with the e-file opening up. You have to sidestep with the move king f8, but right now the harmony in your camp as a black is not amazing, and it feels like white is taking over after something along the lines of h3. Now if you go backwards, I'm just simply going to take on e5, grab a pawn, and probably have a winning position. So instead of that, after knight to f4, white played this move, a rook to d2. Very natural move, of course. You're taking the rook out of the attack of the knight on f4. But unfortunately, after knight takes e3, f takes e3, this intermezzo move, I'm not going to backtrack with my knight, go back to g6. I'm actually going to continue pushing for an immediate attack with this move g4. And now we have knight to g5, knight h3, check. This is, I think, the move that he missed. White, that is, Lenderman, which forces the opening of the g file and this constant pressure with this pawn, this torn in white position on h3. And right now we have this position. After a few more moves, it seems like white is trying some sort of an attack on this side, but it's not going anywhere because the bishop on a7 is just fully controlling the dark squares. You can never play this move c4 to continue your pawn expansion on the queen side because that's going to leave the pawn on d4 very, very sensitive. So we have this position, king to b8. I really like what black is doing.
Yeah.
He's just getting ready for a potential attack on the king side, but he's not in a hurry. I'm going to improve the position of my king first. I'm going to get this king all the way to a7, where he's going to be extremely safe. And only after that, I'm going to start preparing for the h7 pawn push all the way to h4 and pretty much blast open your position and win the game. And this is the position, you see, white is just doing bishop d2, bishop c1. White doesn't have any ways in which he can improve his position. And we have the king landing on a7, bishop to d2, queen to h5. I'm probably going to get this queen all the way to g4, supporting this pawn push, h5, h4. Practically, this position is not looking great for white. Objectively, this position is not looking great for white. I mean, look.
No, it looks like complete trash. I mean,
this is move 31, yeah?
The problem is the bishop.
We're starting from move 26. Look at white's moves.
Yeah.
Bishop d2, bishop c1,
yeah.
Bishop d2, bishop c1, bishop d2, bishop c1.
No,
I would be ashamed to play like this.
Yeah, but he's completely paralyzed, right? He's just up entirely to the mercy of his opponent on when he's gonna take on d4 and go e5, when he's gonna go h5, h4. Sam in full control of the position here against Lenderman, who's had a really tough showing. He's been able to salvage a couple of very tough positions, including that one against Nizhnik, where he was he had a queen and a bishop against the queen and a knight.
Look at him.
Yeah,
that move was played with an oomph. Yeah, he knows he's winning this one.
Yeah, he's clearly in control. We are being told that a huge result there for the standings. Ilya Nizhnik has defeated Jeffrey Sean. Let's take a look at how that finished up. We left it over after this nice combination. Rook e2, apparently the computer did not like very much. I don't know why. King d1, also not a very big fan, is the computer. But eventually, what had to happen happened, which is that something established itself on e3. I'm not entirely sure about the move rook a3 because can you actually take on a6 here? Knight takes d5 seems to come with a lot of threats. I feel knight takes d5. Sorry. Knight takes d5 comes with the threat of rook takes e4 and of knight e3 check. And I'm not really sure how you're planning on dealing with that. And now that I'm noticing that I don't actually have a next move, I guess Jeffrey resigned here. A strange sequence to finish the game, honestly, because this looks pretty obvious. But it was difficult to suggest anything for Jeffrey at this point. It's very difficult, as we mentioned, to even play this position out when Black has such a clear plan of pushing his pawns forward. And it's hard to see what White is going to do.
And this is exactly what you anticipated, Alejandro.
Yeah.
You said at the beginning of this endgame, the position objectively was worse, but not completely losing. But from a practical perspective, this is just impossible to play as White. You're going to lose in the next 10 moves, as he did.
Yeah, he didn't even make it to 5, and it's more of a concept of how difficult this position is to play than to how resourceful Jeffrey is. I mean, he's an incredibly resourceful player. He can kind of claw his way out of the most difficult positions. But this is an endgame that is not new to any of us, not to Ilya, not to Jeffrey, not to either one of us in the commentary booth. This is a typical knight Earth position in which once you lose those 2 pawns on the G and H file, you basically lose. There's a lot of endgames like this. My student Darius Fiertz actually won a very important game in a Pan American Intercollegiate the exact same way. You give up the exchange, bishop on e5, and you roll the pawns. It's a known idea. And I think Jeffrey got a little bit too feisty.
So much control of the dark squares given by that bishop in the center on e5.
Right. And we are getting set up with, obviously, who is going to be our first guest, somebody that must be very happy from this position. But before we go to him, let me see if I have any big updates in Group B. It seems, just to update everybody, Elsha, Maria Debati, and Christopher, you seem to be fighting it out to a draw. I can't imagine this really goes anywhere else. Chris Repka is still down a pawn. I still think he's probably on the winning side of being down a pawn. And in the other game that's remaining, I feel that Hungaski is getting mated, but we'll analyze that in a little bit in more detail because we do have an important winner of today's round, winning again with the black pieces. It's Ilya Nizhnik.
Thank you, Alejandro. Yes, we are here with surging Ilya. Ilya, 2 in a row. How does that feel with the black pieces against the top-rated player in the event? That's a huge win.
Yeah, that was, honestly, I did not really expect myself to win today's game. Plus, I honestly did not expect my opponent to go for such a sharp line and a Knight of Sicilian. I honestly was expecting a more safe option, such as move 3, bishop b5, where the game would be pretty much even, but he decided to go for a really sharp opening line, and it was anyone's game, and I'm pretty happy about the way I played it. I honestly don't really know where he went wrong.
Did you feel or let's say smelt any sort of weakness coming from yesterday's game for Jeffrey, because he lost also with the white pieces against Jacobian?
Yeah. It seems like, yeah, I wouldn't say that I felt something, but I've already prepared to play in a more of an aggressive style for this event, so that's why I chose a Sicilian defense, unlike my normal opening repertoire, which is on the safer side, such as Petrov, Carroll, and stuff like that. So this was my intention all along, and I guess I was just a lucky receiver of Jeffrey's, maybe poor mood or something. I'm not sure what went wrong for him yesterday, but yeah, it seemed like he lost in a similar manner to me today.
Well, let's take a look at the game, Ilya. We're going to set that up on the screen right now.
Yeah, take us to some of the key moments you thought he kind of let the position go.
Yeah, honestly, I wasn't really familiar with the way he played. So I'm more. I know White usually plays knight d5 pretty much right away after Black plays queen c7, and this, it forces Black to play in a more specific manner. Not, I got a lot of moves for free because he pushed his kingside pawns. But I'm not sure. The position didn't seem worse for White. So yeah, this moment, yeah, we traded knights and then we traded bishops. And here, yeah, after a castle, I believe I spent quite a bit of time calculating what happens after g4. At first, I wasn't really sure what's going on with this movement, but then I think I settled that I'll be fine after I take. F takes g4, queen c4. And yeah, so basically, the thing about this position that White almost never wants to trade queens because because if he does, then the position is going to go into an endgame where white has multiple weaknesses, such as the pawn on d5. I have just in general a better pawn structure in the center, etc.
So if he tries to go queen f5.
Queen f5, I have a pretty move g6, and that's what I was
g6.
going for. And the point is that queen d7, queen gets trapped by rook c7.
And if knight a5, you have
Queen
this
c2
tempo.
check. Yeah, queen c2 was a check.
So you don't take on c2 first. You go rook c7.
Yeah, because if I take
nice
first, and then white will probably get a move like rook d2, and
rook d2,
it probably still works for me, but I just sometimes you just do a queen e4. Yeah, it's no wait no.
Queen takes b3.
Or queen b3 or queen c4 maybe even. Because queen c4 there is no knight a5 as there is a checkmate in the first rank.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably still works for me, but I was honestly a bit too lazy to calculate. Once I saw rook c7 works, I was like, okay, that's enough.
That's a very important detail.
Right. And if there is no other way for white to save both their c2 and their g4 pawn. So obviously the game can still go on. White can sacrifice a pawn on g4, but I liked my chances. It didn't seem like white will have enough counterplay on the king's side. So that's what I thought of g4. And Jeffrey very quickly played. Jeffrey made his next two moves instantaneously, which honestly surprised me quite a bit. So he played rook e1, and I played so I played g6. So g6 actually the engine doesn't really like my move g6. I wonder why. My alternative
maybe g4
was
now. Is
g4?
that a move? No, but then you do the same thing.
I do the same,
right?
and queen c4 forces a queen trade. Otherwise, I still win the pawn on g4. So I'm not sure why it doesn't like g6.
Can I give you the pawn on g4 and try to go for the checkmate with h5 now that you have the pawn on g6?
If you go h5, I'll just trade queens. I think that should be fine.
No, like queen d2. Just play some queen d2, get my queen out of the way, and then you take one pawn, and then I'll give you the second
But you
one.
lost the tempo playing rook e1. You could have done the same thing, just.
But now the pawn's not on g6, right?
Actually, yeah, the pawn has now become a hook, so maybe this might be different.
Just to have rook h1 followed by queen h2.
Well, so if I take on g4, you would play h5 immediately,
yes.
right?
Yeah, it's not our pawns. We just give them away.
Well, yeah. I mean, I did not believe in white's attack. Not gonna lie, I was very confident, and.
I mean, I don't know if this is true or not. Let me ask the engine. The engine says actually the first time on this show agrees with Cristian.
Oh really? Okay.
Well,
thank you.
Nice. So white does have enough, huh? Is it like winning or?
Plus 0.3, whatever.
Plus
you make
0.3. Okay, that's as good as winning. In a position like this, if white has advantage, black is done for. Okay. Well, I guess I might have underestimated white's counterplay then, because I honestly thought that okay, so f4 makes it simple.
Right.
I thought that Jeffrey might have expected me to play bishop f6, because since I'm trying to play bishop f6 regardless, right? That's a great place for my bishop to be on. Yeah, drawing arrows can sometimes be hard. But yeah.
What is this shade? Come on. What's going on? Yes. The last time you got invited here to the commentary booth.
I struggle with that myself. That's why
That's
I know
a personal
how it feels.
attack, Alejandro.
Yeah, it's not nothing. Yeah, it's just I can relate. So I think bishop f6 was yes. I think that's probably what Jeffrey missed. I don't have to play bishop f6 because now white has f5, and that's the problem with bishop f6.
And I think it's important that after queen c4 you can take on g6, queen d3, and you can take another pawn on f7
so
with
two
check.
pawns. Yeah, with this tempo.
And even these endgames are slightly better when you can pretend that this knight comes to e4, but of course taking on f7 is quite nice. So in the game, it felt that he was playing for the compensation, but it's a bit speculative.
I think queen d2 is already, it's probably just close to losing, I'm not gonna lie. I honestly thought that queen d2 just cannot be played, and I saw that Jeffrey has to play bishop f2 here. And go into an endgame, which once again I would be very happy with, because I know that I can never be in danger. Yeah, I would have taken on d3, would have played rook e8, knight f6. Yeah, my knight would come out. Maybe would go to g4, would apply some pressure against the d5 pawn, and yeah, I was pretty content with this. But here, yeah, I think Jeffrey might have missed this idea. I'm not sure if this is the most precise way to solidify my advantage, but it definitely felt like I'm not risking to lose anymore. So as soon as I go for this trade on c2.
Yeah, and I think this was a very practical. I really don't care what the engine says. We don't have it on anyway.
Okay.
But this looked very clean to me. We're just going on and on there on how easy it is to play this for black, and on the opposite, how difficult it is to play this for white. Black puts something on e5, rolls the pawns,
Right.
and that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing, Jeffrey might have put a little bit more of a fight later on in the game. There was a moment here. If you keep going over here, I think Rook F1 it might have been, or in my mind, it might have been the critical mistake from a practical standpoint. Ancient doesn't really agree. Actually, it doesn't even like my move Rook E2, which I wonder why. But okay, no matter. I thought instead of Rook F1, what should have played Rook E4, which I thought was the original idea of the move Knight D2.
Yeah, it actually did think that this was the best move.
Yeah, and then I would have obviously taken on E4 because if I don't, the rook comes to E6 and gets some counterplay.
Right. But without the rooks, then becomes
Bishop E5 and then King B3, and I think this might be the best practical chance. Yeah, I saw this, but I thought that I'm going to be faster. I didn't even calculate precisely, but Jeffrey spent 25 minutes, I believe, before playing Rook D to F1, and he might have just calculated everything till the end.
Would you try to exchange the knights now with Knight F6, or what's the plan?
I thought I can just play King H6 and just start pushing my pawns, and I'm just going to be faster. Yeah, King H6, G5, G4, G3, you know, and
this one's I can do.
yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you calculate yourself into not allowing yourself chances, right? You calculate it to the end. Perhaps it still gave him some chances, but the way that the game continued, he was just way too passive, and the counterplay on A6 is just no good.
Right. I mean, the knight doesn't get to E6 on time, and that's why it just, yeah, the D5 pawn is a bit too weak to defend. And I actually liked my move Rook E2 to force the king to the first rank and to be even more passive. So actually, because the king is on D1, I now have Knight C4 and I have a whole bunch of fork threats.
Yeah.
Especially since the rook went to A3, that became even stronger.
Well, nice. Continuing here for the tournament, you've had a lot of positions where it seemed like things were going right. You had that position with a slight edge against Lunderman, you had an extra rook against Neiman, but now you're converting those points, and you're doing really well.
Yeah, right. I'm extremely happy. This is a really tough event, and I'm glad that after 7 months of break from classical chess, I'm playing this well, even though I am missing some chances, some opportunities, but still, you see, most of them I'm managing to convert. So I'm gonna try to keep playing the same way, and then hopefully that's gonna lead me to maybe even winning the event.
The trend is definitely positive with you, Ilya. Congratulations, and we're looking forward to see you in the next rounds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. They're always showing fun chess. Incredibly difficult player to play against. And in this particular event, he is showing why he is such a fearsome opponent, certainly playing with precision and getting the best out of all of his opponents so far. He's never really been in trouble, has Ilya. Let's take a look at what we have remaining. We had already those draws that we had talked about earlier. Cristian, what is going on with my student?
That's where I want to take you, Alejandro, and I want to ask your opinion, because I'm not 100% sure if the position went his way, because right now, okay, we see, I think we left it somewhere around here, yeah, queen to b8, queen h4, rook fd8, rook c6, h6. I think the queen on d5 the last time we saw it.
Yeah.
And we were saying that whenever we're going to see bishop takes d6, which probably has to come at some point, we're going to take with the e pawn, and that seems to be
I wasn't sure. I think sometimes you take with the c rook just to eliminate a couple of.
That's what he did.
And that's what he did. Okay.
That's what he did. Yes. And then we got to this position, but I feel like black is simplifying a lot of material, and it doesn't seem like maybe you will have enough ammunition to convert this one. d7, queen e7, g3, king f8, queen d4, and now I'm just simply going to wait. How do you win this position? Because whenever you go queen to d6 to try to transition into a rook endgame, I'm going to be able to take king f8, king e7, and grab the pawn on d7.
Yeah, you never trade those queens.
You
right?
don't do that.
No,
absolutely.
Usually you start fortifying your position. Yeah, you play the move like h5, you put a queen on d5, you put a rook on d3, and then one day you're going to pretend.
So what is the plan? Let's say rook to d3. Let's say I allow you to get your rook queen to d5, and then I just sit.
This is important that at some point you have to sit with the king, because if you sit with the queen on e6, I think there will be variations where I just take it, right? And perhaps I cannot take it here, I don't know, but there will be variations where I put my king on g2 first.
Absolutely.
And those endgames might be
And then
lost.
you will get your king all the way to e5.
My king is to e5, and somehow I win.
Yeah.
So let's pretend that you have to keep on shuffling.
I just go king f8, yeah.
And
How do you continue?
Sometimes you play a tricky move like rook e3. Here I don't think it works because you can take with the queen. Actually, maybe even taking with the rook also works. So I cannot really do that. I can go up with the king. I don't know what it does.
That's okay.
And now the question is, what do I do, right?
That's the thing. I just simply don't see another way to improve your position except potentially starting to push your pawns in front of the king. But that opens up the discussion of how safe your king is going to be.
Well,
remaining.
it's pretty safe. I mean, there will be some possibilities of perpetual, but I mean, the rook on d8 is just permanently stuck, right? The moment you move it, I queen with a check, so I don't even have to really calculate any of that.
So you can even put your queen. Let's say, I don't know,
you
king
can.
to h2, king f8.
You can.
Like, you can even put your queen to c8.
If I felt like it, right?
And I'm still going to wait. Like, where's the breakthrough? How do you force me out of my shell?
It's hard to say, right? It almost feels like it's borderline losing, but...
Very close, very close.
But it's missing the last mechanism. It feels like it's one attacking move away. And it's possible that Dariush will have to organize some kind of pawn storm, as you mentioned, to try to create those threats.
And that begs the question, was it better to just simply take with this pawn?
No, I think in this scenario, I can take on b2.
Queen a4.
And this one might be an even harder version because you do get the two rooks, but I can't actually push my king, right? If I put my queen on f6 and I just stay,
yeah.
This one might be even harder because you can't push anything.
And seems like the engine is agreeing with you in that assessment, Alejandro. Okay, so let's see where we are right now. This is the position we currently have on the board. Queen to c6 was the last move. So I'm expecting something along the lines of king g8, right?
I feel your king g8. I start bringing my king. At some point, I start bringing my pawns. This will be a slow, steady torture. It's going to be unclear which pawns I push.
Yeah.
But I'm running out of ideas, so at some point you just do it.
G4, G5,
it's your only idea. If it works, it doesn't matter. You have to do it, and hopefully you open up enough avenues for a trick down the line.
Yep, and he will try for a very long time. Let's see what's happening in Chris Repka's game, because I feel this one kind of slipped as well. We thought that Chris has a very potent attack, right? I think it was something along the lines of this position. He was a
this
pawn
looked
down,
very promising.
but his king was the black king cannot really castle very easily. So we saw this move, bishop to e7, queen to d4, f6. Why not castle? You might ask. Well, actually, I'm going to go queen to b6, which is going to force the queen trade. And after the queen trade, of course, you cannot stop my b pawn from promoting. Grabbing the exchange, also this rook coming to d7, this is just simply all she wrote for black. So instead of that, he played this move f6. This is a move that you don't want to play in this type of position with the king still stuck in the center. Queen to c4, g5, this is another move you don't want to play with the king stuck in the center, but he was going for it. And it seems like this move, bishop to d6, was not the correct approach.
It is a bit of a mystifying move to me, the move bishop d6. I understand why he wants to get the d6 square so badly, but you want to keep material to attack your opponent, and it feels like this is a bit too much on the simplifying scale.
Yes, and indeed, that seems to be the case, because right now, after queen to e6, I would assume he saw that he's invading, he saw that he's going to take on e6, and he felt like the king is just simply too vulnerable right now, and probably going to be checkmated. It's not the case. It doesn't seem to be the case, and it feels like black is back in this game and potentially getting very, very, well, first of all, what if I just simply take?
Yeah, he's going to get a pawn up endgame, but at this level, you never win. Well, I wouldn't say that.
The structure is a bit strange, right? You're a bit too advanced.
You get h5, g4 in.
This is complete draw.
Yeah, you know, at the 2700 level, I guarantee that this is a draw 99% of the time. At this level, I have seen people lose it once in a while. So it's not like I'm going to say it's a dead draw, especially because you don't have the usual structure.
And it seems like they haven't traded the queens, really?
He actually played rook d6. I'm a little shocked at that.
You have the chance of trading the queens and going into that technical endgame. I think you have to take it.
I think that's just optimism.
This
like this is really asking for it.
Yeah.
I mean, your king's on g6, dude. You can trade queens. The moment it's offered to you, you take it and then you think later.
And he has 2 minutes on the clock. 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock, with the king on g6 completely exposed, you're going to leave the queens on the board. This is not a very good practical decision by Mikhail Leon.
It's not even about whether the move is strong or not strong. It's just such a strange practical decision.
Not a good practical decision.
A lot of the times you can see that players have very similar understanding. They have very similar amount of tactics, very similar capacity in the openings. But sometimes some players are just savvier when it comes to making this kind of difficult decisions in time pressure and applying logic. Because sometimes when you get to these positions, you're in time pressure, you're calculating. In one of them, you calculate you're down a pawn, and the other one, you calculate you're not down a pawn. But it's kind of obvious from an outsider's perspective, somebody that's not calculating variation, somebody that's looking at the position without really counting move by move, that where you start in this position is that you start by turning off the queens, and it doesn't matter if you lose a pawn, because when you see that this queen on e2 on e6 can just retreat to e2, you're kind of left wondering, why didn't I snap it when I could, right?
And you know from a technical perspective that that endgame is a draw.
Yeah, you know it.
You have to know that.
You know it. It's kind of uncomfortable sometimes that you don't really want to defend it. You want to lift, but sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet in chess and use those Dvoretsky endgame manual techniques and say, I know how to do it. I read the book, even if it was like 25 years ago. I still know how to do it, and you have to prove it, and it's part of being a grandmaster. I really don't like this decision to play rook d6. But all right, we'll move on from here for a little bit. To finish off the A group, it seems like the game between Misha Antipov and Ray Robson should pretty much finish at any moment. Antipov got back his pawn. He's still in the slightly worse of a completely drawn position.
Rook to a5, rook to d1, defend that pawn.
This pawn is dead, but it's not dead.
Just defend it.
You can just defend it, rook d1. Nothing's going to happen. I mean, if it was difficult to win Dariush's position, imagine how difficult it is to win this position. Yeah. You're never going to do that. All right, so this one I expect will go to a draw. Dariush, we said, was pressing. I'm curious on the Kamil Dragun game against Hans Niemann.
Well, he's a pawn up.
He is a pawn up, and it's not just that, right? It's the possibility of the connected pass pawns on the other side of the board that has me kind of concerned, not kind of concerned, very concerned for Hans in this position. I think objectively this should be winning.
Yeah.
I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the knight on a very bad scenario can even come to d5 or e4. The pawn on f4 is just not going anywhere. Actually, rook d3. This is a threat, I understand. Knight takes f4 is a threat, and I'm picking up the pawn, but I'm assuming rook f6 is coming. And then I think even a move like rook d3. Block it with the king
on f3.
Put the king on f3. It's on a light square. Put everything on a light square. This is good technique. Your opponent has a dark square bishop. You don't blunder anything very simply by putting everything on a light square. So this guy goes on a light square, this guy goes on a light square. The knight will eventually have to go to a dark square at some point, but not for a while.
He played it.
And rook d3, and Kamil is of my generation, a little bit less, but not that much less. He understands perfectly how to play these positions. And
he might be getting his first victory.
I think this one's it. This looks very hopeless for black. The rook comes to d5. At some point, I can start pushing the pawns on the queen side, but quite honestly, I could probably spend a few tempi, spend a few effort tempi into just picking up f4. Just pick up the pawn. It's a bit uncomfortable. You do have to play rook f3, rook d4, rook e4, take the pawn.
So let's see, what if I just put my bishop on e3, right? So let's say bishop c5.
But that's the thing, right? If you go bishop c5 here and bishop e3, then again, this rook might take a while to get there, but I'll put it here, or I'll put it somewhere where I'm attacking f4. I could even start with the move like rook c3 and c5, b4.
Yeah.
And you just don't have enough pieces, right? You don't have enough pieces to do everything you need to do. You need to defend against the c pawn, defend against the attacks on the f pawn. Your king's pretty far away, and even if it wasn't far away, it's hard to improve him. This looks very, very close to hopeless.
Well, one game that is definitely hopeless is, and we're going to stay within the A group, is the one between Lenderman and Sam Sevian, because Sam is just breaking through at this point. Let's see what happened. We left it off after queen to g4. This was the last move, and we saw a very confident Sam in the position on camera. We saw that he understands.
And it's actually over, Cristian. Yeah, actually over. Alex Lenderman resigns against Sam Sevian, who's having a heck of a year.
Wow.
Chess-wise, just improving his rating dramatically, I would say, after being stuck for a very long time in the low to mid 2600s.
I'm going to call it right now. He's playing like a 27-plus player right now.
Well, yeah, we could check the TPR for that, confirm it. But
Not
yes.
only in this tournament, but in the past year.
Yeah, in the past year,
It feels, at some point you feel when a player makes that leap forward.
yeah,
right?
he's
I
had a
feel it for
string,
Sam.
and he's had a string of good events, right? It's
Yeah.
not just this event, it's not just the Grand Prix that he had a fantastic showing in, but also the U.S. Championship where he tied for first place with Wesley So and Fabiano Caruana. Of course, we can't really say he tied for first place because he lost the playoff, but in the normal tournament, he got as many points as those two players, and when you're in the company of Wesley So and Fabiano Caruana in your chess results, something is going well in your career. So just take us through how this finished up, Cristian.
Yes, absolutely. So after queen to g4, of course, you see this pressure on e4, and this is exactly what you need to find as black in the position. Where are the targets? Where is my next target? It looks like you're giving up a rook, but no, you're not actually giving up a rook, because once you take it, I take your rook with devastating consequences. The pawns are still equal. Nevertheless, I'm invading, and you're simply suffocating at this point with the white pieces. You don't have any squares for your pieces. Queen to f1 has to drop back because otherwise you get checkmated. I'm not going to exchange the queens, and you cannot take this pawn on h3. This is a key idea in the position, because if you take on h3, of course, we see the bishop on c1 just simply hanging there. So what he played was rook to a2, rook takes f2, rook takes f2, h5. I'm not even concerned about taking your pawn on e4. Sure, you can take this pawn on e4, but I want to preserve this pawn on h3. This is a very annoying pawn for white's position. Just holds him suffocated there. And after rook takes f2, he played the move h5, trying to create another weakness in the position. h4, as we were mentioning previously, trying to break through on the king side and checkmate the white king. Queen to e2, do you want to trade the queens? Absolutely not. Queen to g6, queen to f3, h4, very, very nice play by white. E takes d4, c takes d4. Hey, guess what? I have another pawn on the e file that I can attack your center and open up my bishop, finally including my last piece into the attack. Once this guy opens up, well, this is going to be all she wrote for the player with the white pieces. Alex Lenderman, that is. We have this position, queen takes g3, and at this point he was like, okay, I'm completely disgusted with my position. We're going to enter an endgame where I'm going to lose every single pawn in the position. Bishop coming to d4. This pawn on a4 is a huge weakness. You have absolutely no chance to create any sort of counterplay. No more pawns on this side for white to even hope and dream that you could potentially get something close to promotion. This is just simply over. Alex understands that. He resigns the game, and I believe Sam Sevian might be getting his first victory of this event. He was on 50%, now he's on +1.
That actually surprises me. He's had such a solid event, but yeah.
And might not be the case. I might be wrong in that regard.
I think you might be right. He actually surprised Nishnik on the first round. He got a really good position from the opening, but Nishnik was able to draw that one. I'm trying to think if Sam has won a game here. It feels like he has, because he was in the good side of a position in every one.
He has not.
About
he has not. I just checked it. He has not. 50%.
Moving to +1.
Moving to +1. Yeah.
Very nice for him. All right, let's go to the some games that we've neglected a little bit, but I think they're wrapping up. Somehow this king was getting checkmated in the center, but it is no longer getting checkmated in the center. That's a good news for Hungaski. The bad news for Hungaski, it's getting checkmated on the queen side. And I think
that's how chess works. Sometimes.
That's how chess works. Yes. And I think the fact that he's also down a pawn is really not that relevant. This seems completely lost, right? I don't even have to turn on an engine for this.
Yeah, one. And we have this opposite color bishop situation with major pieces on the board, and we know that the biggest factor of assessment in this type of positions is who has the initiative and who has the safer king. And the answer to that question is obvious. In this case, white has the initiative and the black king is completely naked. So just by that, you're going to understand that white is completely winning.
Yeah, and then you start calculating stuff and you see, well, there's probably no way to defend the immediate threats.
Do you want to trade queens? Absolutely not.
No.
You're going to go queen c2, keep the queens on the board.
It's only like an academic thought, but if you trade queens, I still think white is completely winning
Probably,
that endgame. Actually.
yes, yes. That h pawn is extremely important.
Yeah,
and
yeah. The
it's
h
going
pawn
to
is
go down the board.
actually going down the board. I do have one extra pawn as white, but it's technically two in many endgames because these two double A pawns are going nowhere. But that, as we said, is a dumb academic thought. The fact is the king on A8 is just completely exposed. I expect a move like queen c1 or queen c2. I'm not really sure which one's the most accurate, and that should be the end of the game. A great run here for Abhimanyu Mishra. Is that making it a hat trick?
3 in a row, yeah.
Very nice there for the youngster, bouncing back from a loss against JJ Alimarandi in the second round and then winning 3 in a row to catapult himself not quite to first place because Chris Repka still is slaying the tournament, but certainly happy with his performance.
Well, he's going to be on 3.5. That's a +2 going into the second part of the event. Definitely a comforting result up to this point. Of course, you're not there yet to winning the event, but you're close.
You're absolutely close. Speaking of players that can win the event, curious on the Christopher Yu game and why it has not finished. Because I had given...
Chris is trying.
I don't think so. I think it's Alshan that's trying.
Really? No.
Alshan's white.
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, then Elshan is trying. Yes.
But I'm actually a little curious. What are you playing against Rook G E3? You just moved the king to H4.
King to H4, yeah.
And
I would assume that's the only.
And like nothing happened, right?
No. Well, you can go back, right? Or you can go to E1. So what happens if you try to go to E1?
I think you just have to go Rook F8. There's a slight trick in this position. Cristian wants to trick me as he usually does. It's not a great trick because you lose B6 at the end. But there's this trick where you go check. Let me just put some kind of inane move to show it. Check here, Rook takes G3, takes King Rook G1. And there's this skewer at the end, but unfortunately
well, I actually did not see that, but thank you for giving me credit for it. I'll take the credit for it.
It's good stuff, Cristian, just take it. But I think most sensible moves here with black are with white.
No, the problem is that after Rook E1, I think Rook F8 might be problematic for black.
Yeah, but I'll play Rook E7. I mean,
I take and Rook H8.
Oh, do you want to get into this kind of
And
endgames?
now you lose a pawn, and who knows what's next. Yeah, I think you might be losing this.
It's an interesting endgame. I'm actually not sure of the evaluation of it. But it's certainly not something Christopher wants to see. So perhaps going with the Rook all the one to E1 is very, very unnecessary. Just keep it where it is.
But what if isn't Rook F... Wait. So isn't Rook F8 actually a threat right now?
So Rook F8 is certainly a threat right now, yeah?
Okay,
I agree with that.
How do you defend against that?
All right. Let us start with the... I actually like this move.
Okay.
But the thing is, what do I do here?
And I think he played it. My eyesight is not that great, but I think I see something on E3.
Yes, there's something on D3, actually.
D3, there you go. My eyesight is not great at all. So that makes a lot of sense, of course. Wait.
No. No, it doesn't.
It doesn't make any sense.
How does something out of D3? Maybe we can get the... we have the boards here now. He played Rook E3, King H4, and then instead of Rook E1, he did play the move Rook E D3, which it just kind of passes the move. It says, yes, Rook F8, you can play, you can pick up the pawn on F7, but I'll pick up the pawn on G3, and I assume he's calculated this out to a draw. The youngster at this point of life calculates better than I do, so I will believe him. Yeah, I guess it's true, right? Rook F8 is the only winning try. Rook takes G3. You take this way, you're never going to go anywhere, so you take the other way. King here, but if I keep giving checks, I feel I'm just improving your king. But I don't have another plan. And
so what if I take with the other rook?
The other rook, I just felt I just move to E6 and
then I go to F6.
And then I just keep running.
But now I take a pawn, right?
I don't see where you take the pawn. You have this trick
H6.
here, but I can always take it back.
No. I'll take on H6.
Ah, you take that pawn.
That pawn, yeah.
And that pawn might be more valuable. Actually, that's not so easy, yeah? I still feel this is within the realm of a draw, but you start wondering why I shed a pawn for this.
Yeah, these 4 rook endgames are always extremely tricky.
Yeah, they're somewhat tricky at this point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could go rook g1 and pretend that your
Rook
king...
g1, rook g6. And then maybe I'll get my king to h6. If I manage to do that, then I'm getting very close to pushing that pawn down the board.
Yeah, I don't see a very clean solution here, actually.
Let's go back a couple of moves.
Yeah.
Maybe after rook f6, try to keep connection with the rooks.
And then...
e7.
It's not a move I really want to make, though, but sometimes in chess, you just have to make the ugly move. But king e7, yes, you can force me even down to the 8th rank.
Because right now I have a threat, right? It's rook h3, followed by the other rook to g3, and then taking on h5 with the check.
Yeah.
I want to see that pawn from h5 out. Yeah, I want it off the board. That's the biggest threat in the position for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be ugly, but it might be sufficient, as they say. And I don't have the tempi to create something and defend my pawn on h5 at the same time. No, not a shocker, right, that this should end in a draw.
No.
All right. Speaking of games that might end in a draw, do I have any updates in my student's game? I'm actually really curious about that endgame. No, and we probably will not have any updates until about 9 or 9:30 p.m. today. Because, I mean, the only way you make progress here, you push the king, you make move 49 with a pawn, you adjust the king.
Well, there is some changes that are happening in the position, and that is, we remember the queen was in front. Right now, the queen is behind this battery on the d file for white. So we see the rook on. I like this idea because it does protect the king much better when I'm going to start pushing my pawns. And this is this is the only way I can make any progress. So right now, I'm seeing in the future of this game something along the lines of king to h3 followed by g4, g5. This is the big question right now. How are you going to attack this hook on h6? This is the pawn that you have to focus your attention on. Are you going to go straight up with a g4, g5, or are you first going to block that pawn with h5? This is the question that Darius is going to have to answer.
There you go.
h5, there you go, he answered it.
He answered it.
h5, blocking this, let's say, hook weakness, however you want to look at it, on h6. And that's why he put this rook on d6, right? Because whenever we're going to get to the point where my pawn lands on a g5, well, with the rook on d6, the pressure on h6 is going to be reinforced. I like this idea.
And there's a small trick, right? That if you're king f8, take on h6.
Very nice, Alejandro. You've been doing your tactics. Yes, because if you take queen h8, that's game over, obviously, and you don't have time. Well, actually, you can.
Yeah, but the problem is that you probably get mated, but I assume that even the pawn endgame after rook takes d8
rook takes d8, of course, yeah.
Even this is lost.
Yeah, you can take on g7, you can take on d8, and that's not a good move. That's a mouse slip, of course. I like what he's doing, and I think he definitely found some sort of an idea, at least, right?
Yeah.
It's blocking, well, it's only giving a couple of options for black. Only king f8 no longer possible, king h8 no longer possible, king h7, king g8 seem to be kind of the only two moves that black has in the position, and I will be pushing my pawns in the near future. I like what he's doing. He's definitely developing this position. We're going to have to wait and see whether he's going to be able to convert, but he has great chances.
We'll be waiting for a while. So we do expect a win soon by Abhimanyu. Let me check out Chris Rapka's game after this time pressure. It feels like a lot happened. Black did improve his position significantly just because of this queen being on d5, but still, it feels like it's all white to play. That being said, did he just really play g4? Was this his last move?
Yes,
My
yes
God.
it was.
So what happens if I take, I assume we take back, and then I go rook h8? Because now, for the first time in forever, black has a real, actual threat.
Well, yeah, that's actually the way he should be going, according to the engine, at least.
This feels like, well, if I play queen e4, then we just...
You have to play queen e4.
If I have to play queen e4, then this is just a dead draw. You don't even get to pick up a pawn the way that you did in the other rook endgames, right?
No, absolutely
Not at all.
not. No,
Yeah.
no. This is not good for his winning chances.
No, this one I think is really speeding up to a draw. I can't imagine not taking on g4 in this position with black.
And he has all the time to calculate because the
Yeah.
players just made time control. This is move 41.
Yeah, this is move 41 for Chris, so we'll let him
Actually,
think.
this is move 41. Why did he play it so fast?
I do not know. He took a minute and 30 seconds to play the very committal move g4.
That's
That-
not a good practical decision.
No, there will certainly be tough topics discovered today at the dinner table, at the Mizzou dinner table. And is that it? Do we have anything else left? Because Dragon seems like
Dragon
he's,
is definitely heading towards a victory.
This is just over.
He's
right?
making great progress. I don't think Hans even believes that he can save.
Yeah, I don't think
this
you try this
position
too
at
hard
point.
even.
No.
I think it has come to the point where I think you actually take the bishop.
Yeah, right now
And
you take the bishop.
I think you take the bishop, and then you start harassing the other pawns.
Well, you take the bishop, you make sure that you're not going to lose one of your pawns, so you probably go a4 first.
I think I actually start here. I think it's a bit clever.
Or you can do that.
Because this is a lost pawn endgame, I assume. I'm not going to count it out, but I assume this is a pawn endgame that's lost. Which
Yes,
means that
yes.
you have to enter it, right? Otherwise you take on a7.
Yeah.
And if you have to defend this way, then I'll collect this one immediately.
That's an important detail.
It's an important detail for the pawn. You don't have time for the activity. So I think knight c7, rook h5. Maybe you can pretend with after h6 that you still are in the game, but I feel you're not.
No. It feels like he's definitely heading towards his first victory.
Yeah, good for Camille to come back in the tournament, of course. Not good for Hans Niemann fans, and he has a lot of them. He's one of the rising juniors here in America, just making an incredible leap in rating. And I think that's it, right? I don't think we're missing anything from the rest of the games.
No. So we looked at Darius's game. We looked at what's Antipov doing?
Antipov got into this.
That must be a draw. Right? Wait,
What? I
What
mean,
is it doing?
I mean, I still think it's a draw, but it's one of those draws that once you put it on the board and you realize what you had 5 moves ago, you're thinking, how did I do this to myself, right? How do you go from this position? It looks pretty, specifically this position, I thought, right?
Yeah.
You can see it's a bit unpleasant, but I mean,
One thing you don't want to do is actually exchange the rooks. But I guess rook a3 forces that. Okay, the rook a3 actually forces that. This is all forced.
Yeah, you have to take, right?
Sorry, the queens. You don't want to
you have
exchange
to play
the
the
queens.
queens.
Yeah, because queen c2, that's the important detail. Allows rook to g3. Rook takes
Yeah,
g3.
let me point that out. Queen c2. I don't want to take too much time. We'll get back to it. This was, of course, a losing move because of the
Wait,
pin.
is it? So
Yeah.
king h2?
And then I have...
Queen c3.
And with us, we have tactician and winning his game today, Sam Sevian. He's had a good tournament, but it finally feels like he broke through. Sam, how do you feel today?
It definitely feels good to finally win a game. I've had a few chances in this tournament, but really didn't convert.
Well, let's look at your game, Sam, because that was simply a masterpiece. When did you feel you're taking over?
It was actually near the end of the game when I played Queen h5. I have a very powerful pawn on h3.
Not before.
No, not before. I mean, we can go through the game.
Yeah,
so.
let's go through the game.
Where do you want to start? Because
This is knight g4, queen f6 idea.
yeah, sure. We can go down there. Yeah, it felt like you came in looking for blood, right? I mean,
definitely.
rook g8, g5, you threw the kitchen sink at him. And
I was really happy about this knight d8 move because the knight's just going to f4. And either you have to give away your Italian bishop or allow it to land on f4.
right. And it feels that, I did feel it was a bit impractical to
allow it to go
allow
to
knight f4. But the engine was suggesting that after knight f4, knight d5 was a very strong move in this position.
I'm actually interested in that line. So knight d5, knight takes e2,
You take back.
a queen d8.
And he just wanted to kick out this guy on g4 with h3. I think the move knight h6 fails tactically, right?
Yeah,
Bishop
probably
takes
just
g5.
the bishop g5. I think I wanted to play c6.
c6 is probably forced, and I think the surprising part was how it evaluated this as so much better for
Yeah,
white.
that's definitely surprising.
So bishop takes g4.
Yeah, bishop takes g4.
Bishop takes g4, and it is a computer, so you can imagine.
Oh, it just takes
It
the
co-
pawns, okay.
It just collects. It thinks pawns are free, thank you very much. and it did give white a sizable advantage. But of course, a very scary line, seeing it from afar also down the exchange. But after rook d2, it almost felt like it was his final mistake.
Did he play rook d2 fast?
Relatively, yeah.
Relatively quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perhaps they didn't feel the danger of this position.
I'm definitely happy about knight takes e3 and g4. He found an
And this
interesting
was a
defense.
huge detail. Yeah, very important detail with knight h3.
Oh yes, knight h3 is important because if, let's say, queen g5, ef, rook f2,
Yeah,
white's
you
fine.
put that out.
And you no longer have that pawn on e5 to attack the center. Bishop on a7 is going to stay locked forever.
Right. So we got to this position, and it felt you got everything you wanted.
I think the reason I said queen h5 is because when I played rook df8 here, one of the key ideas in this position is that if you take on f8 and play rook f2,
Yeah.
I can take on f2, and he cannot recapture with the queen because of ed, cd, bishop takes d4. So that pin actually works for me. And what he did is he
Can
played
you go queen f7 after taking on d4?
Yeah,
queen f7 here.
some little bit of counterplay.
Oh yes, that's a good move. King d8 though.
King d8 and now take on d4.
You can do it before or after, doesn't really
No,
matter.
but now you
still
just
have
simply
to-
take. You can still take. Yeah, king d8 is a big move.
King d7, I still seem safe. Yeah.
Yeah, you're still good.
Yeah, you can even go to c6 probably.
Yes.
The engine defends it, but we don't care what the engine
Yeah.
thinks. So,
So I think his big mistake is b5 because he allowed me to play a5 and then bishop b6. The king goes to a7 unopposed.
right.
If he played a5 instead of b5, I would have to play c6, and my king is still weak.
Right.
In that position. Yeah, but now I was extremely happy. White just has no moves.
Maybe this is the time that he should have gone for takes, and rook f2.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, and without the ability of going to c6
Yes.
in many variations. But he missed that chance, and it felt, once this king got to a7, I love it, by the way, very Kasparov-like, right? You improve your king to the maximum before you get that killing blow. And it was a very bad symptom, this bishop c1, bishop d2. And once you put the queen on h5, we saw how you put this queen on g4. You certainly must have felt you were winning by this point.
Yeah, here I felt like it's close to winning.
Yeah, absolutely.
h5, h4 incoming with great effect.
Sam, tell us a little bit about your year in chess, not so much in the calendar year, but you've had not so busy, but very successful year. In the past few tournaments, you've attained all-time highs in your rating. What's clicked?
Well, I played no tournaments during the pandemic, as many people also weren't able to play. And I basically just worked on chess those 2 years. I've only played 4 or 5 events, I'd say, since the pandemic, but
they went well. They went very well.
They've gone very
Well, that work is definitely paying off, Sam. Congratulations once again, and good luck in the rest of your games.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Sam Sevian, one of the strongest players here in America, playing in the U.S. Chess Championship, doing a fantastic job there, playing in the Grand Prix, and now playing here at the St. Louis Chess Club yet again in the Spring Classic with his first victory. Honestly, we were surprised it was his first victory because he's always showing solid preparation, solid ideas, and calculates really, really well. So Sam moves to +1, quite deservedly so. Lenderman having a little bit of a tough time finding his stride. He's had a rough few months, and I think it's showing. I think Lenderman's going to have to sit back at the drawing board and figure out what's going on for him to improve on his chess. So we have 5 games remaining, 5 games done. I believe that is correct. Let's see, where do we want to go?
And a few of them are just about to end. Hungaski definitely
Hungaski is
close to resigning.
Yeah, this king is not surviving.
Hans Niemann close to resigning.
Yeah, so we see this king is just being, this king
Harassed
is not
around.
going to survive. Meanwhile, Hans Niemann Camille did old school style, go into the endgame.
So just play a4.
I think
now,
a4
right?
is sufficient. I think every move wins. But I would find it difficult to find a grandmaster that doesn't play the move a4 in this position, just so that you can have the move a5 later on in the game in case that you need to defend the a-pawn. But as mentioned, I mean, most moves that don't blunder the rook in one move are winning. Except king e4, actually, that's also not winning.
Well, that almost blunders the rook in one move.
Almost, yes.
Because you will have to give the rook
You
for
do have
that
to give
pawn.
it up. Meanwhile, this is becoming...
Not what Antipov wanted.
I have to admit that this is becoming more unpleasant every time I look at it. It is a 3 versus 2, but with the pawn on e6, this is pretty much a draw. It's very difficult to make progress with the black pieces.
But with the pawn on d6, on the other hand.
But with the pawn on d6 and the king on g2 already cut, there's some serious winning chances for black. I'm not really sure how you make immediate progress. I don't know if first you put the rook on d7 or even on b6 to maybe support the rook, the pawn from the back. It does uncut the king, so it's not an easy decision to make. But whatever happened, it's clear that black has some very realistic winning chances, whereas a few moves ago, I would have thought that the players would just shake their hands, agree to a draw, and go home. But even the minor slip at this level of chess will cause a great deal of suffering for your position. And this is what happens with Antipov, maybe with the move g3 earlier on, where I felt, yeah, this is a draw, but you had to be a little bit more careful not to get into these kind of positions. And then we have a bunch of games that seem like they will go for a while,
well,
right?
just to show what Antipov should have done in this endgame, not to have to worry about all this defense that right now he's facing. At this point, this was very close to the time, the second time control. Move 39. He played this move, king to g2, a very easy move to make, right? You're just getting closer to the center, you're activating your king, but that just loses a very crucial tempo. What he had to do at this point, and he only had 52 seconds, he had to calculate the most critical continuation, and that is rook to g4, attacking the pawn. You want to exchange as many pawns as possible. Now, after king to g6, f4, f6, my assumption is that this is where he stopped. He saw that he takes, you cannot move the rook without losing the pawn, and this is going to be quite unpleasant after king coming to f5, king going to e5, potentially losing this pawn, right? But right now, he just has to simply continue one extra move forward. Go rook to e4. You're obviously threatening rook to e6, and that's going to capture the pawn on d6. You're giving up the g3 pawn, but after king to f2, there's no way. Well, you can go king to f5, but after rook to e6, you're not going to take on g3, allowing that losing king and pawn endgame, but you're actually going to go rook to e6, capture the pawn on d6, and there's absolutely no way in which black can win this position. This would have been a very, very easy draw, and very forced as well. This is what you have to be looking for, forced ways in which you can simplify the position. He did not find this. He chose to make the easy move, get closer the time control, king to g2, but right now he's going to be suffering this position. Absolutely, after g4, as you were mentioning, the computer already really likes black. Very, very close to a decisive advantage. Rook to b6, just play it slow, right? Because this pawn is going to land on f6, right? And the rook on b6 is going to protect it later on when the pawn from d6 is going to move down the board. This is a very nice setup for black to try to activate his pieces. King to c5 followed by d5. You will not have to worry about your pawn structure. And white, well, white is going to have to fight very, very hard for the draw in this position.
And let's not exaggerate it. Let's not let the audience think that we think this is winning for black. We
No.
do think this should be in the realm of a draw.
Technical, yes.
This should be in the realm of a technical draw. The thing is, you slip once, and mistakes rarely come alone. You feel psychologically that you should never have gotten into this to begin with, and it affects your mood. And sometimes it's difficult to sit down and actually force the draw, right? It's not like it was his choice to get into this position.
Well, it's also a repeating pattern for Mihail, specifically in this event, because he lost with the white pieces, also in the Joko Piano, also a position that was very, very close to a draw against Darius Zierch a couple of rounds ago. And at some point, he had this option of simplifying and going into an equal endgame, which he did not take. He tried to go for a more, and unfortunately that wasn't enough. He just simply missed an easy tactic and lost very easily in that game. And when those patterns start repeating, you start losing confidence. And it is extremely important with the clock ticking, as we will see. Well, this is going to become a very difficult defense.
Yeah, plenty of time for both players. They have obviously breached the move 40. I mean, it's kind of clear considering how much material there is on the board. But it's not going to be easy for Misha here. He's getting a warm welcome to America. Tough event here. And Moria Diabati is still trying against Christopher Yu. Starting to really lose hope in White's chances here. You will have to play Rook F8 ideas at some point, but they just never really quite seem to be enough. You can always move the Rook to B7. The moment you trade rooks, you might as well sign the score sheets because that's a draw even without the B pawn. But if you go something like Rook here and I keep passing, at some point you're going to have to play the move Rook F8 and just bite the bullet and go for that endgame. Because if you don't do that, well, there's really no plan. That's pretty much all there is to it. So besides that, we have, okay, Niemann is about to resign, Kongatsu is about to resign, and Chris Repka did play the move Queen E4, which we thought was absolutely mandatory. I'm still baffled by his decision to play G4 in a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Takes.
No, at move 41.
Yeah, move 41. Yeah,
that's the thing, at move 41.
You kind of get it. Like, they tell us this kind of young and early, but we never listen, that don't make committing pawn moves on move 40. You totally get that, right? You don't do that. But you already did get
Reach
to
the
move
time
40.
control.
You already reached time control. So if you wanted to make a committing move here, you can do it, but spend the time on it. The move G4.
And you see, that is a question that I want to ask you, how you approach this. Because sometimes you don't trust, let's say, your score sheet. You see that you've written that this is move 40, but you don't actually trust it. And you want to make that one extra move just to make sure, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Because on the clock, I don't think he sees that he's getting the extra 30 minutes.
I think everybody gets this panic, right?
Yeah,
That did I really make 40? Did I really not double right one? But I mean, you just have to trust yourself sometimes in this kind of scenarios. Especially, you know, you can peek at your opponent. And
Exactly.
if it matches, then you're good. If it doesn't match, then you panic.
Also, exactly with this move. When you have in mind ideas of playing moves such as G4,
Yeah.
you have to relax for a second,
And just think
wait
about it.
and think about it, and don't play the move G4. Look, the position is getting closer to equality, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty obvious.
Yeah, yeah.
The queen on D5, very nicely placed. You have some pressure on B4, but do you really want to play G4 and give your opponent this type of counter chances on the H file? Never.
No, it really baffles me what the move G4 was about. But it's one of those slight practical decisions that you sometimes look back on and you really don't understand it.
Yeah.
And again, it's not one of those situations in which we think this completely changes the character of the position. It goes from winning to draw. Not anything like that. Black has made incredible amount of headway in defending his position. The queen on D5 is a monstrous piece. But that being said, pretty much any move that was not G4, you have to give the edge to White. It's still a more comfortable king. It's still a better structure.
Keep the pressure on.
Keep the pressure. And when we're talking about literally any move, I mean literally any move, right? Rook E6, Rook E4, Rook E3, whatever.
King H2, yeah.
All right, well, we are nearing the end of our broadcast here in the St. Louis Chess Club as we are giving you as much as we can in a reduced schedule. But let's take a look at what's happened so far in the A group today, as we do have a lot of results.
Well, it seems like this is a round in which Black is definitely doing amazing. He already won 2 games. Ilya Nishnik and Sam Sevian won with the black pieces. It seems like Camille is going to score his first victory. That's going to be a victory for him against Hans Niemann. Darius is still trying against Aram Hakobian.
Yeah.
And Ray Robson, once again, with the black pieces, is putting some pressure on the struggling Mikhail Antipov. And how about the B group, Alejandro?
Yeah, the B group doesn't shake up that much, but I think the biggest result of the day by far is going to be Abhimanyu Mishra defeating Robert Hungaski. We actually expect all the other games to end in a draw.
Yeah.
And that means that Mishra is putting a little bit more pressure on Chris Repka.
No, absolutely. After a potential win by Mishra, a potential draw by Chris Repka and Christopher Yu, I think Mishra is going to be on 3.5, joining Christopher Yu in second position, and they're going to be 1 full point behind Chris Repka.
Yeah, an absolutely great showing there by the two youngsters of the tournament, in Christopher Yu and Abhimanyu Mishra, but also the collegiate guys saying, hey, I still can make progress,
Yep.
and Repka showing scintillating chess, perhaps not his best day today, but still 4.5 out of 5 is just an incredible score to start.
Absolutely. Well, we had a lot of fun, Alejandro, today. Another great round, and we're going to be back tomorrow at the same time.
Same time.
3:30 p.m. Central Time. The games start, don't forget, 2.5 hours earlier at 1 p.m. Central Time, and we're going to see you during the show tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow.
Any reproduction or distribution of this content without the express written consent of the St. Louis Chess Club is prohibited.